Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mayor. As Councilman Chin and Senator Squadron will say, welcome to their district. This is District 1. My name is Wellington Chen. I'm the Executive Director of the Chinatown Partnership Local Development Corporation. As someone who's working very hard with the 11th Chinatown bid in North America to tackle a vexing and tenacious and chronic headache that's plagued this area since when Charles Dickens visited us in 1842, more than 175 years ago. As many of you know, if you know your history, Mr. Dickens was not particularly impressed with our rodents, our filth, and what he encountered at the 5 Points, which is directly across the street, AKA known as Columbus Park, Chinatown, Little Italy, the Civic Center, and the surrounding area. And I'm delighted to report today that all of that will start to change due to a generous and substantial investment by the city and by this mayor. I'm told that there's a whopping 118 units of solar power trash compactor known as the Big Belly will soon be deployed throughout our district and in this vast area, benefiting tens of thousands of people. It is a dream that our board of directors have long yearned for quite a few years now, since the bid was formed a few years ago, but we never had the fund nor the resources to acquire or implement them. Some estimate at the time put the cost of these environmental friendly units at close to $500,000 at that time. In the era of tight budgets and cost cutting, while trying to reduce waste and to cut down on the consumption of single-use plastic bags, these rodent, odor, resistant proof units will not only help to improve our street conditions, help our clean street contractors reduce their workload, but also increase their productivity by not having to constantly change the plastic liners at the hundreds of trash cans in our large district each day like they're doing now. Something they're doing several times a day, 364 days a year. All these extra benefits while resulting in much better living and working condition. We have long advocated and said a less well-endowed community deserves as much and perhaps even more a clean and healthy neighborhood than other wealthy or well-to-do communities. This morning, we're very fortunate to have someone who understands this better than anyone else, as he believes in true parity and equity for the less fortunate and for all involved. A man who believes in public-private partnership and a fan of Charles Dickens as a writer, but does not believe that we should live in a separate but unequal tale of two cities. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to introduce the man who made all this possible, the Mayor of the City of New York, Mayor Bill de Blasio. We're absolutely delighted and thrilled with this generous gift.
Excellent. Thank you, my friend. Well, Wellington, thank you so much. You know your history and you know your literature. And you're right, Charles Dickens was not impressed when he came to visit this area in 1842. And to be fair to Charles Dickens, even though he didn't appreciate the greatness of New York City, he was right about the Tale of Two Cities. And he was right about the fact that every neighborhood deserves decency. And we are living out that idea in our time, trying to make sure that people in every community can have health and sanitation and decent living conditions. This announcement today is part of that. It's part of addressing something that's been a challenge in New York City for a long time and honestly hasn't been addressed well enough. But we're going to make that change starting today, and it's great to have you, Wellington, as a partner, because this only works, as Wellington said, it can't just be government. Government has a very important role to play, but it also is about community leaders and community members being part of the solution. This plan has been worked on for a long time, and it's a big departure from what was done in the past. I want to give special credit and thanks to our Chief Administrative Officer, Laura Anglin, who led the charge in putting this together. Where are you, Laura? You're right there. I'm sorry, you're next to me. I was mesmerized by Wellington's speech. I didn't hear you. I didn't see you. And I also want to thank our colleagues from all of the agencies that are going to have to play a very important role. HPD has a big piece of this as well. And as I mentioned, this is going to be a partnership in many, many ways. We've been working closely with the City Council, and you'll hear from Council members Chin and Reynoso. I want to also thank Council member Rosie Mendez, who's been a strong advocate for these changes. I want to acknowledge and thank the resident association leaders who are here from Smith and Rutgers and LaGuardia houses. We're going to need resident leaders and in other places tenant leaders to be a key part of this as well. And I want to thank our hosts today. I want to thank Jenny Tran of the Chinatown Senior Citizen Center and Edgar Pereira of the Chinese American Planning Council. Everyone is in this together. Now, I want to just say something about our city at the beginning. We're very, very proud as New Yorkers, and we know there are thousands of wonderful symbols of this city, starting with our people. When we think of New York City, we're proud to think about the Statue of Liberty or Central Park or Coney Island or Harlem or any number of other wonderful places. Unfortunately, when you think of New York City, you think of some things that aren't so good and haven't been so good for a long time, and the image of rats does come to mind. That's because it's been a problem for way too long. I don't know any New Yorker who likes rats. It doesn't matter what community you're in, everyone wants to get rid of rats. I will admit personally to having a certain admiration for Pizza Rat, but that's the only rat I have ever managed to like. So think about what it means in everyday life. Rats are incredibly upsetting to people in every way. And they're dangerous, they're unhealthy. It's not just an aesthetic thing, it's something much deeper. And the problem is that you could be doing everything right, but something around you could be causing the rat population to grow. So think about an example of someone who has a small restaurant, a coffee shop, a diner, and they're doing everything right and they're keeping everything clean, but right next door is an apartment building that leaves the trash out for long periods of time right next to that restaurant. What's going to happen? That's going to attract rats. If you leave trash out for a long time, the rats will show up, and then soon they'll be in the restaurant too. Or imagine for a moment you are a family living in public housing, and you're doing everything you can to get by. But the problem is the building you're in is a haven for rats. Why? And this is shocking. I did not know this until we went through this process over the last weeks. Because there are buildings in public housing that have not concrete floors. They have dirt floors to this day. Think about that. You go into the basement of a public housing building, and there's a dirt floor in some cases, which unfortunately makes it really easy for rats to come in. So we think about situations like that and say they're not acceptable, and they don't have to be. These are fixable problems. They never were fixed previously. They were ignored, and that is certainly, as Wellington said, that's a reflection on the Tale of Two Cities. I'm never shocked when I see something in public housing that got ignored for decades, or something like the poor diner owner who had to deal with a problem for years and years that wasn't addressed. Our job is to change the paradigm. So we came to the recognition that simply exterminating rats on a regular basis wasn't enough. It's good, it's been helpful. I don't want to take away from the excellent efforts that really did reduce the population some. But as we really looked at the facts, it became clear that our efforts at extermination over years and decades were basically like bailing out a leaky boat. You know, you would get the water out for a while and then it would just come back. We were not, as a city, solving the problem. This plan today is a change of approach. This plan is about going at the root causes. Stopping rats from having a place to live, stopping them from having the food that they want to eat. It's as simple as that. If you take away the places that rats can live, we all get to live better. And that's what we're here to do. This is a $32 million plan. Nothing of this size has ever been attempted in New York City. We project that this will, in the target areas where we're starting, reduce the rat population by 70%. We believe that this first wave could be the model for something much bigger. We want to see it work in the places that are toughest in this city. If we do that, we can go a lot farther. We've been working closely with the City Council. They will be our partners in this effort. A number of the steps that we're going to outline today are starting immediately. Some others will take time to develop. But literally some of the things, for example, you see these big belly trash cans over there, and we at the end of this press conference will go and stand by those to give you a good visual. Those are rat-proof. Even Pizza Rat, with his amazing initiative and ingenuity, could not get into that. There's literally, they are strong, but they cannot pull down that handle. So that's a rat-proof trash can. You're going to see those starting to be placed in this neighborhood and other neighborhoods that are literally have the biggest rat problems in New York City starting today. You can clap for that. So where are those places? Well, we've identified 3 areas that have the biggest problems in the city, and you're sitting right in the middle of one of them. East Village, Lower East Side, Chinatown is one focal point. The Grand Concourse area in the Bronx, and Bed-Stuy and Bushwick in Brooklyn. That's where we're having the biggest problems in this whole city. So we're going at the hardest cases first, and again, we believe this plan is going to work, and if it works, we will then expand outward to other areas that need our help. You're going to hear the details in a moment from Commissioner Garcia, but I keep saying it's as simple as this. Take away the food, take away the shelter from rats. Deprive them of a place to live, deprive them of the food to eat, you don't have as many rats, and that's what we're aiming to do. In addition to those big belly trash cans, you're also going to see right away more frequent trash pickups in these target areas, in the parks, which have been a focal point problem, and on the streets with the street baskets. Starting immediately, the number of trash pickups will increase. You'll see in this plan increased fines for illegal dumping. That doesn't mean someone who throws a candy wrapper on the ground. That means people who systematically put a lot of stuff into our public trash cans they shouldn't, or leave them by the road. These fines are very serious that are being proposed here. They're going to make a big difference. We're going to change the rules about when larger buildings, that's 10 units or more, can put out their trash. Right now, the rules make no sense. They actually make it easier for rats to find food because the rule allows a building to put out the trash, and it sits and it sits and it sits for hours upon hours. We're changing the rules to require those larger buildings to put out the trash in the very early morning hours, as close to the pickup time as possible, to deprive rats of time to go find that source of food. And I said, we're going to fix this incredible, unbelievable situation, dirt basements in our public housing buildings. Those will be once and for all gone. And that's a major investment in and of itself of $16 million to eliminate those dirt basements, those dirt floors, and modernize all of our public housing buildings in these areas. So we're going to move forward. Some of these pieces we can do right this minute administratively. Others will require partnership with the council to pass laws. But as I said, there's a lot of agreement here. And in the meantime, there's still a lot that everyone can do. So I want to remind all New Yorkers, we need your help to fight rats. You got to be careful with how you dispose of food. If you leave food out on the street, or you don't close your trash bag, or you do anything that makes it easier for the rats, that encourages them. You got to be careful about how you put your food waste out. If you see rats, we need you to call it in, because whether it's these new approaches or traditional extermination, the faster we know, the more we can do. So please, if you see rats in your neighborhood, call 311 and let us know where you saw them. And our public engagement unit, these good people sitting behind me who do great work going out in communities and letting people know about the things we can do to help. They are flyering and are passing this out today to let New Yorkers know what they can do to address rat problems in their neighborhoods, to report them, and smart practices to help avoid rats coming to your area. That is English, that is Chinese. So we'll be doing them in languages appropriate to each neighborhood. So look, in the end, this is not a magic bullet, but it is a very big change of approach. We think it's going to change people's lives. We think it's going to make the city healthier. We understand this is one of the big unresolved questions. We will not be getting another visit from Charles Dickens. But I'd like to believe that visitors who come here over the next few years will see something different here in this neighborhood. They're going to see a lot fewer rats and a much cleaner and healthier neighborhood. And that's what this plan is about. Just a few words in Spanish. En Nueva York hemos tenido un problema de ratas por mucho tiempo. Más que una molestia, pueden ser una gran amenaza para la salud. El plan que estamos anunciando hoy reconoce la gravedad del problema. Vamos a quitarles la comida y acabar con los sitios donde se esconden. With that, I want
Chinatown Senior Center and to Wellington and the Chinatown Partnership for hosting today's event, and also for our very long set of strategies in targeted neighborhoods to eliminate the conditions that allow them to thrive. And if you actually read the book Rats, you will find that this is a challenging endeavor because they are, if nothing else, survivalists. In these three zones here in Chinatown and the East Village and in Bed-Stuy and Bushwick in Brooklyn and the Grand Concourse section of the Bronx, three communities that have the worst rat infestations in the city, we are doing everything we can to eliminate conditions that are conducive to rats. As the mayor said, the best way to eliminate rats is to deprive them of food. They need about an ounce a day, including garbage generated in homes and businesses and litter on New York City streets. We want to take away their 4-star sidewalk cafes. To achieve this, we are increasing the collection of litter baskets on our street corners and in our parks, and adding additional trucks for residential refuse collection for buildings in these neighborhoods. You know, one of the things that is true is as the city gets more popular, as parks get more popular, you need to continue to provide more services to make it be a safe and healthy environment. As the mayor said, we are also replacing our standard wire litter baskets with rat-resistant models, including the smart compacting garbage cans that can provide data also on when they're full. They talk to us through the cloud. Altogether, we're replacing more than 1,800 open wire baskets on streets and in parks with rat-resistant alternatives. And we are relying on the support of groups like the Chinatown Partnership to ensure that we are maximizing the benefits of these new investments. We will work with the City Council to pass legislation requiring large properties to set out their waste the day of collection rather than up to 16 hours in advance. And we will work to increase fines for those that illegally dump large amounts of garbage, creating conditions in which rats thrive. We will step up enforcement against property owners that for too long have failed to take steps to eliminate rat infestations, whether or not that's allowing burrows on their property or holes into their basement or on their sidewalks. With partners at the Health Department, buildings, and HPD, we are creating a multi-agency task force to inspect buildings with a long history of rat issues and issue violations, both rat-related and not. So we're going to bring the whole team together to make sure that they're doing everything to ensure that there is not a vermin infestation and that things are safe for those residents. You know, rats feast on the leftover food that New Yorkers throw away in the trash. But we can prevent them from accessing that food by separating our organic waste, and we can also achieve our zero waste goals. DSNY is expanding curbside organic service this year to more than 3 million New Yorkers and has opened up enrollment to every apartment building in the Bronx and Manhattan, including we have people who've joined from Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village. So really big buildings can be a part of this. By the end of next year, New York City Organics will serve every single New Yorker in all 5 boroughs. No one will have an excuse for not putting their food waste in sealed, rat-resistant brown bins. We encourage all New Yorkers to separate their organics, either to be collected curbside or dropped off at one of our over 100 food waste drop-off sites. This is truly an interagency effort. This initiative is a collaboration between sanitation, the health department, the New York Housing Authority, the Parks Department, buildings, HPD, small business services, and many other agencies. And I also want to particularly call out that the business improvement districts, who I know have been at the forefront of much of this for many years, are also going to be critical to this effort. The city is taking an unprecedented step of investing $31.9 million in these zones with the worst infestations to cut the rat population by 70%. But our vision cannot succeed if the public does not work with us. Everyone should do their part to properly manage waste and eliminate the food that rats need to survive. At the end of the day, it's really just about good housekeeping in order to keep the city safe, healthy, and clean. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also want to acknowledge our Parks Commissioner. Thank you to Mitch Silver for being here. And again, your agency is going to be a big part of this as well. So thank you very, very much. Now I want to turn to our City Council colleagues. And we're going to be working very closely both on the legislation we have to pass and the budget actions, et cetera, but also through your district offices to act on these challenges on the ground. So I want to thank you for your partnership. Let's start with Margaret Chin, Councilman Margaret Chin.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, Mayor, for coming to my district. And I also want to welcome my colleague, Councilmember Reynoso, Councilmember Mendez, my sister from the neighboring district, and also our Senator Squadron for this important rat reduction announcement. And thank you to the CPC Senior Center for hosting us. Founder Virginia Key is here, and the board chair, Jenny Lowe, is here also. Look, we see rat everywhere, especially when we're riding on the subway, right? They're coming in and out of the track, but we do run across them on the street, especially when garbage are out, and I hear it constantly from my constituents. Look, my office, we have done park cleanup, we have done rat academies, and we still haven't solved the problem.
Rat Academy,
yes, rat academies with the Department of Health. Yeah. And we work with Commissioner Bassett. We did a great job on cutting down the rat population at Columbus Park, right? That was great. But we still need more to do. And I am so thrilled to see those compactors, okay? And then you also have the foot pedal. So people don't have to even use their hand. They just use their foot. And we want to see these all across the district and in our parks, because the parks in my district are so highly utilized, and the garbage can fills up, and you just cannot empty it fast enough. So I'm really proud to hear that Department of Sanitation is doing more pickup on the corner basket and trash pickup. So I am looking forward to really getting this program expand to the rest of my district and the rest of the city. Because I know we're only starting in certain area, but on behalf of my constituents at Smith, Rutgers, and LaGuardia houses, we also want to thank you, Mayor, for the upgrade. I was shocked when I heard that they also had dirt floor in the basement. It's just unbelievable. But at least we're doing something about it. And in the City Council, working together with my colleague, I am going to be introducing legislation that requires building with more than 10 units within the pilot mitigation zone to put out their garbage out on the curb no earlier than 4 o'clock in the morning on pickup days. So this way it will minimize the opportunity for the rat, to eat through the garbage can or the bags and to feast on our leftovers. Even though I know New Yorkers, we have great leftovers, but we don't want the rats to get to it. But Mayor, thank you for the investment of $32 million to start. And I really want to thank all the commissioner, Parks Commissioner, Sanitation Commissioner, Department of Health Commissioner, because this has to be a collective effort. And I know that we will get it done.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. So our next speaker knows too much about this issue, both from representing his community, which has a serious challenge, but also as the chair of the Committee on Sanitation. My pleasure to introduce Councilmember Antonio Reynoso.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. These are pieces of legislation that I feel are going to fly through the Sanitation Committee. I'm excited to get them in. And just want to say, it's like the Pied Piper of New York for us here. And I'm excited that you've addressed this issue in a comprehensive way and that we're finally going to see some changes, especially in target areas that are really a problem. En este momento, decirle a la ciudad de Nueva York lo terrible que es el problema de nuestros ratones o las ratas en nuestras comunidades. Y con el trabajo que está haciendo el alcalde hoy y la ciudad de Nueva York, vamos a ver un cambio, un progreso, especialmente en 3 comunidades que están afectadas en Nueva York, en Bushwick, en el Bronx y también en Manhattan. Y es un orgullo poder ser la cabeza del Comité de Sanidad y vamos a ver que esto progrese lo más fácil y lo más rápido posible. Otra vez, muchas gracias al alcalde Blasio por el cambio que ha hecho y un logro para Nueva York. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. And finally, he has been able to escape Albany and return to us to a better place. And has
done our best to help it be this way.
No, you did. You did a lot of good things to help us. I want to thank you, Senator, for that. A lot of good things came out of this legislative session. My pleasure to introduce Senator Dan Squadron.
Thank you very much, and I thank the mayor and the commissioners very much for really focusing, year in and year out, the complaints we get in our office, the things everyday New Yorkers care about, are exactly this kind of issue, and to take it on means a big difference in people's daily lives, and we really appreciate that a great deal. And we appreciate you being at this great senior center where Councilmember Chin and I have cooked off before, and Chinese American Planning Council
Really
does a great job.
All right.
And all I can really say is we rat this ratuction highly. It is not an intractable problem. That's the best I could do.
Your writers need to.
Thank you.
Your writers need to work on that. Fire your writers. Really? That's the last statement?
I mean, when you bomb, sometimes you should walk.
Yeah, move off. Okay. Okay. All right, we are going to take questions. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Mendez. Do you want to? We would welcome your thoughts as well, and thank you for being here in support.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I was so excited when I got the news. I was in my car on the speakerphone, and I was screaming with delight at the fact that we were going to get these extra big bellies in Tompkins Square Park. The community surrounding Tompkins Square Park is one of the highest rat indexes in the city. And so I don't know about subways, but, the rats walk with us on the pathways. And down Avenue C, I've had to come out of restaurants running into the street to get away from rats. Some of my staff, on their way home, and they live in public housing, have had rats run over their feet. The problem, particularly in NYCHA, in my district, got really worse after Superstorm Sandy. I used to chair the Committee on Public Housing. I never knew that there were dirt floors in our public housing. This was all news to me. So I think all of these measures will go a long, long way. And just to say, it's a problem we've been tackling, and I wanted to give a special shout out to Carolyn Bragdon from DOH. She has come to meetings in my community gardens, in our community boards. We have worked in coalition with neighborhood associations, block associations, tenant associations. We've gotten big bellies before, but clearly we need more. So there is much more to be done in this, even though the city has been working really hard at it. And I am so glad that you're taking these extra measures, Mr. Mayor. It'll go a long way. My community is certainly very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you for all you've been doing with us in your district to address the problem, and this will allow us to do a lot more. Okay, we're going to take questions on this topic, and then we will be happy to go to other topics. Yes? The big belly?
Also, how many you're going to
Okay, so let's answer the question, and then we'll go and demonstrate before we continue. So go ahead. First on the how many we will have. There you go.
In the lower side, we will have 84 in the parks. In addition, in the Chinatown partnership bid, there will be an additional 118 that we will be placing around.
So, okay, we're going to do a quick demonstration with the elected officials would join me, and Commissioner Garcia, Commissioner Silver.
336.
We need to do it for team. All right, still. Turn in front.
I'm going to demonstrate getting the wrap.
Sit down, please. Sit down.
Let's take this back for a
All right, so all of you.
Killer rat that is.
Down, guys, in the middle. You guys down. You gotta go down.
I wouldn't personally.
Thank you.
Down, sit down.
Okay. You two got it. Okay. For all of you familiar with the mailbox, same concept. So you put everything in here, shove it, and again, there is no way a rat. First of all, it would have to be a rat with incredible skill to climb this high, but there's no way they're going to get through that. Then the hands-free method. I can do the hands-free method. Yeah. So, just throw it in, never have to touch anything. And it's solar power. It's compact with the energy from solar power.
Couldn't a rat step on the hands-free function?
Yeah, it's hard rats to figure out how to do that. You should be very worried.
You need to go somewhere.
That's right. Rat gets there, the rat will not be getting out. It'll be the last place there. All right, because it's compacting.
But then they would have to do that in the club. If I could also just add
Hold on,
that.
everyone get settled.
Sorry.
Hold on, everyone, come on back. And Laura's going to add something here.
I just wanted to also mention that in addition to the big bellies that I mentioned previously, there also will be an additional 20 that will go into Tompkins Square Park, and those you'll see deployed immediately,
And just clarify immediately.
hopefully starting tomorrow.
We have them
Right.
in the garage. We will start deploying them as soon as we get out of here.
Literally today, tomorrow, you'll start to put them in place. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, just to have an idea of how many rats we're talking about that are gonna be reduced.
Eradicate.
Specific number of the rats we're planning to eradicate in a year or 2 years, and then about the technology of that trash can. Is it U.S. made? Has it been used in any other major city in the world? What is it coming from?
I'll deal with the rats, and then I'll turn it over to Catherine. We're hoping to achieve, our goal is a 70% reduction. The question would be how many rats are there, which I don't think anyone has an answer to. So obviously, we're looking at percentages now. We will be tracking it and monitoring with the Department of Health and their rat reservoir program.
We don't have an approximate.
Do you know how many rats there are in New York City? I don't think we know.
Many thousands of
Many
rats
thousands of
will
rats.
be eradicated in the process.
I'll turn to Catherine for the big bellies.
So the big belly technology actually is currently in place in several areas in the city already, both in Lower Manhattan and downtown Brooklyn, but also in North Brooklyn. And so this is an expansion of that. One of the things and the reason we're moving in this direction is particularly in parks, when they were put in place, they did see a reduction in rat burrows, which is sort of a sign of where the population is. So they have been in use. They do require a lot of care and servicing, but they have made a big difference in areas where they have been put into use.
And
Yes, I believe they are U.S. made.
And they compact, just for everyone to sort of visualize, they compact as stuff goes in, they're compacting regularly, or they compact like once an hour, or how does it work?
So they actually use a sensor to figure out how full the big belly is, and then it will push everything down to try and create more room.
Right. So this is one of the big differences. It really, in terms of clarifying it, is two things. One, it's fully sealed, which we've never had with a trash can before in this city. Two, it's actually pressing down the trash to make room for more trash. So that's going to reduce the problem of trash cans overflowing. That is obviously a classic New York City problem. And then on top of that, the additional pickups will mean that we have more chance to stay on top of the situation and make sure there's always room in the trash can.
If I may just give a number.
Please.
Just to answer your question about the numbers, across the street last summer with Mary Bassett, the commissioner, and Councilman Margaret Chin, was 1,200 rats eradicated through the dry ice method. Highly successful, just on that square park across the street where you're standing, the Columbus Park. 1,200 of them.
In one park.
In one park.
Yeah. So, yes.
You mentioned increasing enforcement on rat-related violations. Just so you can give an example of what those violations would be, and also what is the proposal to hike the fine for illegal dumping to how much?
I mean, I can do the fines first. So the current fine for illegal dumping is $1,500 as the start, as the first level. We would increase that to $5,000. And then instead of the next level is $10,000, we would go straight to the $20,000 for multiple offenses. In addition, I'm sorry, I'm going to turn it over to Health, I think, to answer the second part of your question.
So I think your question was about violations for rats. So the health department conducts inspections of properties and looks for signs of rats, for example, burrows that have been mentioned. And when we see signs of rats, we order the property owner to remove those burrows, and then we follow up, and if they haven't been removed, we issue violations.
So you talk about reducing the population 70%, but this seems to be not really about eradicating the rats, but sort of cutting off the food or whatever. So is the idea that they would naturally die because they don't have enough food, or how exactly?
I think what we're saying is that we will continue with the extermination effort, and the health department already does. We will step up the extermination effort, but we are trying to also eliminate any food or habitat from them. So they were already doing an enormous amount of extermination across the city, wherever they identified big rat reservoirs. This is to try and add another layer to that to make it more efficient.
Okay, David.
So how are we going, if you can't count the rats directly, how are you going to create a baseline with which to compare to get to the 70% reduction? And then were the Mint X garbage bags at all, do they figure into this plan?
Let me speak to the first one, we'll take the second one. What we do have to go by is reports. So I'm not the expert they are, but I would say in a world where you don't have a perfect baseline number, and you can imagine how on earth we're not going to go out and tag each rat or call a meeting of the rats or something. It's like an impossibility to literally know the number. But you can judge, as with any other quality of life issue, by how many calls you get, how many complaints. So one way of looking at this is we will judge by what we believe will be a major reduction in the number of complaints if people actually don't see rats anymore. But you guys can give a more erudite answer.
And in addition, the health department does currently do burrow counts when they go and do their visits through the rat reservoir program. So we typically, if you see a reduction of rats, you will see a substantial reduction in rat burrows. So that's an indicator that we're looking for as well.
How many burrows you've found in each of these three locations?
I don't know if the health department knows that. We have the data. We can provide that to you.
And
Do you have a second part?
Yeah. You said this had been in planning stage for a long time. Was it delayed because of the federal investigation that also touched on some use of Mint X rat prevention garbage bags? Is that
From
right?
my perspective and everything I know, no. My colleagues.
No, we never considered any of that. We looked at really this plan as a comprehensive source of eliminating habitat and food.
So it's not delayed because of the federal investigation. You weren't planning on releasing this plan earlier?
No, we've been, I'm going to give a layman's answer, and the experts can give you more. You've heard about the efforts to eradicate the rat reservoirs. You've heard about the wonderfully named Rat Academy to teach people to do, they're very proud of that, Department of Health. There's been targeted eradication efforts like Wellington just mentioned. all of them were meaningful. I don't want to take away from any of it. They did produce results. They did not get at the root cause enough. And so the conversation has been going on for a while in the administration is how do you get at the root cause? How do you actually cut off the lifestyle of the New York City rat and make it impossible to live here? So the mandate I gave the team was look under every stone and think of everything, even if it has not been done previously. And I said, considering the magnitude of the problem, this was worthy of a major investment. This is the plan that was put together under Laura's leadership with all these agencies. And I can tell immediately it's a major departure from the past, and it's the kind of thing that actually could get at root causes. So that's what was going on. It had nothing to do with any external factors. Gloria.
So just as a follow-up, do these cans need bags in them, or can you walk us through how they're emptied and how is the trash collected beyond the receptacle?
Certainly. Certainly. So we do like them to have bags. It's not required. There is a garbage can inside that garbage can that can be removed so that it can be tipped into a collection truck, either the Parks Department or Department of Sanitation collection truck. But we do prefer the use of bags just because that ends up being neater. No Mintex.
Anna.
So a couple questions. What are you reducing to 70%? It's not clear.
Again, I'm starting with the common sense point that the coin of the realm is complaints. That's how we know.
311 complaints.
We want to reduce the things that are causing the 311 complaints.
The reason why I ask is because you can't say you're going to reduce something by 70% if there's no benchmark for which people are holding.
Right, I understand that logic, and I'm saying in a world where you cannot get a perfect benchmark, we still have a sense of goal based on what we do know, which is complaints, visible reports, complaints, what our inspectors see. And we do have a lot of eyes on the situation, both from the government and from our partners and from everyday people. That's what gives us a measure. That's what we want to reduce against. But again, you guys are more expert. You can fill in the blank.
Let me add, it's really borough counts. I think we said that the health department would provide that. We have that information for these 3 zones that we're happy to provide after this event.
And then a follow-up. You said reducing fines for illegal dumping. The issue.
No, increasing the opposite.
Increasing fines, reducing illegal dumping.
Yes.
In general. How are the fines being increased actually going to decrease illegal dumping? Because the problem is not necessarily that the fines are too low, it's that actually catching these people is difficult.
Look, I know you are thinking in part about some of the challenges that are being experienced in Staten Island. There's different illegal dumping challenges around the city. Some are harder to catch, others less so. I don't know of any situation where when you increase fines and tell people about it a lot, it does not affect behavior. So let's start with that. I do believe that constant increase in consequence does affect people's thinking and action. But you're right, we also need a lot of enforcement. And that's something we intend to focus on. So let's talk about what kind of enforcement we'll do.
Certainly, we will do stakeouts, as you know, for these types of activities. We're looking into more use of cameras. But I also encourage the public, if you help us catch someone who's illegally dumping, you have a right to part of that fine.
Could you say that again?
If you help us catch someone illegally dumping and they are fined for that, you have a right to a portion of that fine. There's an affidavit.
So wait a minute, if the fine goes up, that means people could make more money if they successfully report someone who does it.
Well, I'm not sure exactly. We haven't written the legislation, but right, the objective here has never been that the city was looking for a revenue source. We really need help from the community about, if you see something, say something, and if you see something and say something and we win, we want you to win too.
I'm sorry. On Staten Island specifically, is the city doing anything right now for rat reduction?
So as you suggest, I'll speak to this plan, then pass to you guys on the broader question, health or sanitation. That again, this plan is the 3 areas of the city we consider to be the biggest challenges. If we see success here, then we're going to build out. Now, this is costly. Let's be very clear. And it's costly, particularly where the problem is greatest. So, as we build out, in theory, it could be more cost efficient. But we will look at all 5 boroughs, at other areas that we should move in on. But these communities have such a persistent problem. We want to prove that here we can really turn the tide, and then we're going to expand outward. You want to speak to what we are doing already in Staten Island?
Sure. We have taken a look at Staten Island. We looked all over the city for signs of rats. I'm happy to report that Staten Island has the lowest rates of rats that we see around the city. We do have one rat reservoir that in Staten Island, and we're getting ready to graduate that reservoir because we have seen improvements and New Brighton. And
Building of some kind, or?
so a reservoir is an area where we see where rats really thrive because there's an ecosystem that supports ongoing generation of rats. We bring intensive resources there to educate people about proper trash management and bring in integrated pest management. And then when we see drops in the rates of rats and we no longer need intensive health department support, we graduate that rat reservoir, and the reservoir in Staten Island is getting ready to graduate.
Graduate. Juliet.
Yes. Since there's a human element usually involved in how people throw away their trash, is there any sort of education campaign for like commercial establishments, restaurants, or just people on the street on how to correctly, go to the trash can or wrap their trash?
We do have, as part of this plan, $250,000 will be allocated to the health department for an outreach educational campaign, as well as the mayor said, these kind people behind us will be working closely with us to get an educational campaign underway.
Mara.
Yeah, a couple questions. Why, is there any thinking about why these areas specifically have the highest concentration or are thought to have the highest concentration of rats? And is there any common denominator, for example, poverty or zoning? That's the first part of the question.
In planning for the initiative, we took a hard look at our data, and that's how we ended up targeting these neighborhoods. These are neighborhoods that have rat reservoirs in them, which means that we had already identified them as areas with severe rat infestations. Each neighborhood is a little bit different for why it supports an active rat community, but there are some common denominators. There needs to be access to food, access to water, places to live. So it can correlate to often there's a lot of park space because rats can live in park areas. So this is really, we're so excited about this initiative because it really means that we're going to bring all of these agencies together in a very targeted way to address issues around sanitation, bring more resources to the parks, and I think we're really going to be able to make some great improvements. There really isn't, and that's part of the approach here is we bring case managers to each neighborhood so we can understand what's happening in that particular neighborhood that is contributing to the active rat population.
The question is, are there any specific diseases that we see among New Yorkers that could be linked to rats?
So as you may know, several months ago we did identify a small cluster of a disease called leptospirosis, which is connected to rats. It's very, very unusual. That was the first time we had seen that in New York City. And again, I think this initiative is exciting because we will be better protecting public health.
Okay, yeah.
Mayor, I just wanted to know if you have a cost breakdown of how much these cans cost.
Yep. On the can specifically. Yeah. Laura or Catherine?
The Big Bellies cost approximately $7,000 a piece. And that is with a maintenance contract as well. Since they are very mechanical, they need to be checked frequently. So they are very expensive, $7,000 a piece. The steel cans, the other ones we're putting in to replace all the wire baskets, they are more reasonable but still expensive, $623 per piece, per container.
So is that money included in the $32 million?
Correct.
And has the contract for these cans already been finalized? Or?
We already have contracts to buy these cans. We may need to go to new vendors because of the magnitude we're looking at, but we already have some on hand as well, so it'll be a mix.
Okay. Juliet.
Yeah. Any thought to containers for, let's say, apartment buildings or hotels? Because right now they put the garbage bags out on the street, and sometimes they're broken or they're opened by the people who look for plastic bottles, and that, you know, portends all other problems. So is there any sort of strategy to address that?
So there is a wide variety of housing stock in New York City. Some apartment buildings do have containerized collection. Much of NYCHA has containerized collection because they have the space for the containers. The hotels are a different story because those are managed by the private sector. So we look at each property individually, one, whether or not they can be containerized, whether or not we can actually service a container at that location, and that's always balanced with the fact that if we go to containerization, I can't put a plow on it.
Could you explain that for us laymen, please?
Containerized trucks do not get, you cannot put a plow.
Oh, you mean you can't use it for double duty
I
as
can't
a
double
snowplow?
duty, yeah.
Right.
So
Okay.
we balance that.
So I just want to see if I can interpret for the sake of the answer to Juliet that, so the hotel issue, whether a perfect situation or not, that's private haulers, and restaurants typically are too, right? But in terms of residential, I think the answer is we look for every opportunity to do that. It comes with a downside, which is you have to buy more trucks. But way back, way back.
Because these are enclosed containers, are there any concerns about them being used for various things? Because obviously, it's hidden, it could potentially be put inside by someone looking to inflict damage. It's still New York, obviously.
We work very closely with NYPD whenever there are events or there are threats, and they have steel plates that go over that opening because they can't be removed like we remove litter baskets. So that
they
is
can
how
be
we manage it.
secured.
They can be secured,
Right.
and we work closely with NYPD whenever they tell us that's what they needs to happen.
Thank you. Was there anything else in the back? Coming forward? Yeah, okay.
Just back to the Mintex bags for a moment. What is the current status of those? Are they being used? Because they're marketed as being sort of rat repellent, right?
I have not. Sanitation doesn't have any, so I don't have any idea.
I don't believe we have now an active purchase. We use it as a pilot program. It had somewhat mixed reviews. Other than that, we continue to use our regular vendors for our bags, but I don't believe of the initial pilot that we're still using some of the Mintex bags. We prefer to use the can. They're a lot more secure than having the bags. It has a smell that's supposed to repel rats, but our preference is to use both the big bellies and have the steel reinforcements.
Department recommend using them? Because I know when they came to my neighborhood, they suddenly, after the health department came through, suddenly there were a lot of Mintex bags around. Does the health department use them, recommend their use of them?
And that's not part of our program.
You off?
Just, I guess, as far as the 4 a.m. Curbside time for these buildings, do you anticipate any kind of, I guess, new burden put on these buildings as far as having staff available at that hour?
I anticipate resistance, but I want to remind you, and my colleagues will go into it. So every building over 9 units has to have a live-in. Live-in is the proper term?
Live-in or available?
Available 24-hour super. So they're already legally obligated to have a super who could attend to anything at any hour of the day. But, I mean, think about it for a minute. Of course, people will complain about it who have to do the work. I don't doubt it. But if it helps us to avoid rats, if it helps us to keep things cleaner and safer for people, I will acknowledge their complaints and keep moving. I mean, this is something we have to do to make our city cleaner. It's as simple as that.
In addition, it was just how nice it would be to be able to walk around and not see trash all night long sitting on the street.
And let's talk about that just comparison. So, Catherine, talk about how many hours fewer this will typically mean for those huge piles of trash bags being out in front of a building.
So this should typically be about a 12-hour. This should typically be about a 12-hour reduction in time on the curb.
So that's. I'm sorry, I'll just interrupt and then you continue. We probably should have said that a little more clearly up front. We're taking half a day off of the time that those vast piles of trash bags will be out in front of larger buildings. So that's a quality of life improvement unto itself, let alone what it's going to mean in terms of reducing rats.
Right. So currently the rule in the city of New York is you can put out your refuse and recycling starting at 4 p.m. the night before. So we usually collect starting at 6 a.m. and therefore they will have between 4 a.m. and when we start collection at 6 a.m. So you're talking about a 2-hour window that it should be on the curb.
Only in the targeted zones, or is this citywide?
It's only in the targeted zones for this proposal so that we can evaluate it.
Right. And if it works, we want to go farther, obviously.
Third basin. Do you have any idea how many buildings will have what curbs and when this will start?
Yeah, and that's Mike.
We're Mike Kelly. We're starting pretty much immediately. We're doing the cleanouts and we're doing the raking and the baiting and preparing the surface. And RFP will be going out a little bit later, and we hope to have these things in the.
But how many was the question?
Oh yeah,
how many
we've
buildings?
got. There's going to be 111 facilities. Will get these, and there's 70 basements that will be targeted. With this
70 basements that are dirt.
Yes.
In these target areas.
Correct. At 11 different sites.
At 11 different sites. And this, obviously, in this community is some of the oldest public housing in America. So that's part of the issue here. Some of these buildings go back a long, long way, which is maybe a little less surprising that they have dirt basements, but as a general rule, it's still a shock to all of us that any of them still have dirt basements.
Can I also just add that in addition to the basements that we will be fixing, we will also be replacing 220 interior compactors at our public housing facilities, 43 exterior compactors, and 5 bulk crushers. Many of these are over 20 years old, and they're not efficiently containing and compressing the trash.
Yeah.
How long does it take to empty out those, and is that going to slow down the crews picking up the garbage?
So it's just a few more seconds longer than a regular. It has a key. You open the door. You take the garbage can that's inside out. You take it to the truck. You put it back. Close the door. So it's a few more seconds to open the door than it is to just take a wire litter basket, but we don't put that.
And you know, and just one real life thing. You know, you've seen a lot of baskets around that have that like small hole at the top. Same thing. You have to open the door, take the thing out. So this is not an unheard of practice for our sanitation workers.
Yeah, can I just make a point that the capacity of the big bellies are far more than just a regular wire basket. So the pickups themselves should be more infrequent, right? So you're talking about less times a truck needs to go down the street to empty one of those out than a wire basket. Do you know the difference in capacity, Commissioner?
We're not going to do that.
Oh, okay.
We're going to
We
keep
are going to
right.
make sure that we keep the service level the same or increase it, because one of the challenges this neighborhood and some of the other neighborhoods have had, they're very popular. And there have been a lot of very full baskets, and so we want to make sure that we're ensuring that those are always empty.
So to square the 2 points, you will get more trash into these big bellies, but we're going to keep the number of pickups at the same level, or in some cases increase, because we don't want the trash overflow. One of the problems, we all know it, is you see, especially on like a weekend, you see a lot of people put stuff in the trash can, it overflows, and then again, that's the 4-star cafe for the rat, right? If all the bags with food in them are sitting on the ground around the trash can, we've defeated the purpose. So yes, you're exactly right, council member, you can get more in, but we will need to complement that by keeping the pickup levels very high.
And is any part of this initiative going to target train stations, subway stations, where many of the rats live and thrive?
This plan does not. The MTA has been working on that issue, is my understanding.
Yeah. It's not ours, obviously, we don't have jurisdiction there. The fact is, in the case of the NYCHA buildings, where they're living is right under the ground, right under the dirt floor. So that will be its own impact, has nothing to do with the subway. In the case, if you said, well, if a rat came up from the subway, they still are looking for something to eat. We want to deprive them of the something to eat. That has a fundamental impact on their reality. So we think it'll be very deeply felt.
When was the last time you saw a rat in New York City?
Oh, I've seen many a rat. Yeah, I've definitely seen. I know I've seen plenty this year. I see them in parks, and I see them in the subway. Those are the 2 places I've typically. Not so much on streets. Over the years, of course, I've seen it on the streets too.
Upper East Side's.
I'm trying to think. I think I did actually in Carl Schurz Park, but I can't give you exact date of the sighting. Yes.
Couple questions. How did you come up with the 70% number? And should we expect to see more rat corpses? And what's the plan to get rid of them?
We came up with.
We want more rat corpses. We don't want you to see them. So let's explain.
Yes. We came up with the plan by looking at the different pieces, because we've done some different pieces before, but we haven't put it together as a whole plan. So looking at the borough counts, looking at using the dry ice, which is something that will help us dramatically to be able to kill rats, we were able to basically put it together and add it up to 70%. So.
Rat corpse question?
Pardon me?
The question about the rat corpses?
Most of the rats, I would assume, I'm not a rat expert, they die in the burrows, I would assume, so I don't think they go run on the sidewalk and fall down. So.
Hold on. Had someone else? Which one's kid, David?
For Commissioner Garcia, how many roughly trash cans, wired trash cans are there in the city? And then, can someone explain the dry ice method of killing rats?
Sure. It's, and I'm on now, right? It's more than 23,000 wire baskets in the city of New York. Yes. So dry ice is you, and health department can expand on this. We just got permission from oversights to put dry ice in, and what it does is when you put in their burrows is it puts them to sleep. And it actually is much less toxic for other wildlife because you don't want to kill the hawks that eat the rats in the city.
Right. And this was something that we were doing a few years ago, and we were told to stop because dry ice was not deemed a pesticide. So when we started up this working group, we petitioned the state and asked them if we could try to do this again. And very quickly, they worked with us to get federal approval to do this.
So then now I'm fascinated. So where do you put the dry ice?
You have a burrow that has 2 holes. Usually a burrow has an entrance, exit. And so you plug one hole, you put the dry ice right into the burrow, and then you plug the other hole, and then they go to sleep.
Wow.
Well, Boston was doing it for a while when we were doing it last. Chicago, I believe, and then we were all told to stop. So now, I don't know if the other cities will petition or do what, but we were pleased that just last week we got approval to start this again.
Die?
Say
They
again?
die.
Yeah.
They die in their sleep.
Die in
very,
their sleep.
very pleasantly die in their sleep.
Yeah, we're kind to rats. We just want them to go away.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions on this new policy? Yes.
I apologize if this was addressed while I was outside, but what is the population when you say reduced?
Right. It's been debated, in fact. They're going to provide some follow-up numbers on the borough counts. Okay, last call on rats. Rats once, twice. Okay, other questions? Yes.
Mr. Mayor, you mentioned that a lot got done in Albany this session, but there were a couple of big-ticket items I know you favored that did not get done. The first one was body scanners at Rutgers, and I'm just curious your reaction to the fact that that didn't go, and what is the solution then to short-term to reduce violence? And then the second one was elevator safety. I know there was a proposal your administration's been opposed to for a couple of years that would kind of have the state take over the safety inspections. I was wondering what your concern was about that.
Yeah, you know, these jurisdictional matters are always tough when you try and get the 2 levels of government to agree to a change. So it never surprises me when it takes a number of attempts. We're going to keep at it on the elevator safety. I mean, we're doing a lot through our Department of Buildings, but I think we can do better with that new vision. So we'll go right back at it. They'll be back, you know, on the first week of January. We'll go back at it again. On other fronts, I'm sorry, the other one was the body scanners. So the body scanners, I'm very disappointed. It is such a common sense thing. You know, you go into an airport and you go through a scanner, and whether we love the experience or not, we all understand it. But imagine, we know right now on Rikers Island for decades, there's been a problem of weapons being brought in and contraband drugs being brought in, and we know this. We know it's contributing to the violence. We know it endangers officers and inmates alike. And we've done some other things, which I'll describe, but the body scanners are obviously a part of the solution. Now, I want to be fair. We got a lot closer this time. And I want to credit Assemblyman. We need to cut off every. So my view is it's all of the above. You know, it's going to take a very concerted effort. But I feel like we have one hand tied behind our back because we don't have the scanners, and I want to get them as quickly as possible. Okay, way back. Yes, Aaron.
So, Herr Bürgermeister, can you tell us how many...
You know your language.
How many people, other than those who were paid for by the organizers of the rally you spoke at, how many people accompanied you to Germany, and about how much the city paid for their...
So there were no expenses for me or for the 3 staff who went with me. Those were all paid by the sponsor. Those are the only people with me. And then there's the security. I always have security. And look, again, it's a very fair question, and NYPD always provides some kind of estimate, so please ask them for that. But I want to emphasize, whether I go someplace in New York State or I go someplace overseas, they're going to be with me 24 hours a day. And that's just reality. I think it's a little hard for everyday New Yorkers to understand that, and I don't blame them for that. But we're living in a very complicated world. Everyone understands that. And this role, whoever's mayor, is a very prominent role. And security is with me all the time. And so that is a given expense. That's locked in every single day of the year. David.
Can you go in a little, just on the Germany trip, can you go in a little bit into how you were, how that came about? Who invited you? Did you reach out to them in advance to solicit going?
No, I did not. I was very aware, obviously, of the G20, but did not have any assumption of going to it. And then I got an invitation from the, as you know, there's a governing coalition in Germany. Social Democratic Party is a part of that. That's how the invitation came in. It was about 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks ago. And it was clear from the beginning that all, for me and for staff, the expenses would be paid. I was not at all sure if it was something I could do, because at that point we were still in the Albany session. As everyone remembers, we did not know if that would be resolved. We didn't know if we were going to get the things resolved in the Albany session. We didn't know if we were about to have to deal with a new reality without mayoral control of education, et cetera. So I wasn't able to answer for quite a while. And then when the Albany situation got resolved, I thought this was a very special opportunity. And at a point that we would have thought would be a very quiet time of the year in the days after July 4th. So that's what led to me accepting the invitation. Yeah.
Yesterday, a meeting in Brooklyn, a hearing in Brooklyn, had to be canceled in the Bedford Union
Say again,
Armory
I'm sorry?
project. Yesterday, a hearing on the Bedford Union Armory project had to be canceled because of protests. At this point, the Bernelli is the borough president against it, more importantly, the local member is against it. What are you doing? What is your administration doing? What are you going to do to see that project through? So is it part of, your larger mission of affordable housing?
Yeah, it's a very important project, and I understand the frustrations in the community. Crown Heights, I live very near Crown Heights. I've spent a lot of time in Crown Heights. The neighborhood has changed a lot. There's a lot of fear of displacement. I fully understand that. But I want to remind people of the origins of this concept for this development. It was about the Armory. And a lot of people said in Crown Heights, when they saw the Park Slope Armory get done, which is an amazing recreation center for the community, they said, why is that not happening in our community too? And so literally this is a fulfillment of, I think, a vision of equality to say Crown Heights deserves a world-class recreation center too. But there were additional things people wanted. They wanted space for community organizations. That's part of the plan. And obviously this administration's #1 goal in any development is affordable housing, and there's a lot of affordable housing in this plan, which wasn't possible in Park Slope. There was no space to add additional housing. It is possible in Crown Heights. I think the opposition is based on real concern that we're seeing all over the city about the potential for displacement and rising costs. I think we have to do a better job of explaining to people what the benefits are for the community. And we're going to continue to push the developer to make the project as good as it can be for the community. And look, I work very closely with the borough president and the council member. Those are ongoing discussions. I respect their position, but I also believe that if that project continues to evolve, that they'll keep an open mind. So ultimately, it's something that could do a lot of good for the community. Right now, that armory is doing no good for the community. I'd like to see it be something good.
You mentioned that possibility.
Again, that's an ongoing discussion. I don't have any specific idea, but it's an ongoing discussion. Yeah.
You mentioned that the NYPD would maybe be releasing some sort of cost estimate. As far as our reporting, they've told us they don't release any estimates.
I'm not an expert on what they do, but that's who has the number.
Do you think it should be released to the public? Nicole Maliotakis is among those who have said that if it's a decision you've made to take, we know that security goes with you,
Right.
That's a figure that the public, the taxpayer, should be entitled to.
I want to always say when it's security related, I respect the protocols of the NYPD. So that's something that they have. I want whatever's been done in the past to be done here. I'm just not an expert on what they release and what they don't. But whatever's been done in the past in terms of releasing information should be done here as well. That's all I can tell you. Marcia?
Sure, I have two questions on two unrelated topics. The first is about Germany. I think that you're very much aware of the fact that you had a lot of criticism, not only from the police, but from constituents.
From the unions, Martha, I want to be clear about that.
I can tell you that our social media pages were inundated with just regular people who were very upset that you left at this time. So my question is sort of twofold in that regard. One is, what do you say to your parents, number one? And number two, did you ever give any thought to not going, given the fact that a police officer had been shot?
I gave real thought to the most important thing, which is when the services were going to be. And if the services at one point, you know, you may be aware of this, there was a lot of consideration in the family as to when they wanted to do it. At one point, it looked like they were going to do it this last weekend. Clearly, I was going to stay. That was absolutely clear. Then they decided to delay it. And that's literally when I decided to go. The fact is, you know, I think everyone understands that this is an incredibly sad moment for all of us who do this work. I know Commissioner O'Neill feels the same way. To go to the hospital when one of these horrible tragedies occurred, we went into the officer's room in the hospital as she was dying. We had to break the news to her daughter, Genesis. We obviously provided, after that, an update to all of you in the middle of the night as to what was happening. And the next day, as you know, I went to the 4-6 precinct, which is really an extraordinary place, and spent time with the officers there. And from my point of view, the next thing that was going to happen, of course, would be the services. And I wanted to visit the family, but as I said, it was clear in the first few days there was a lot the family was working through, and it was not yet the time to do such a visit. But I knew that I could visit them and spend real time with them when things were a little more settled, and then, of course, go to the wake and to the services. So that's what I saw. There was a vigil that at the time I made the decision we did not even know about, had not been fully put together to the best of my understanding. I know the commissioner did not attend that either. So that was the thought process, that obviously I had very painfully had to share this moment with the family. I feel horrible for them. I feel so bad for this family. I spent a lot of time with the family Monday in their home, and just unbelievable pain, but also unbelievable strength in that family. So I think they are very clear that all of us, me and everyone at City Hall and the entire NYPD, is going to be here for them for the long haul. Those are the things going through my mind.
Has to do with an increase in homeless around Tompkins Square Park and the East Village. Apparently, there's been an influx of people who come in by train or Canada. They're called proskies.
You are up to date on your phrases.
And so there's been a lot of calls to 311 and 911. I wonder, what are you doing about this problem in this location where you're getting people who come in by rail just today and are causing a big problem in the neighborhood?
Yeah, I have my own views, and council member may have her views as well on this matter. That's Tompkins Square's you, right? Yeah. We all know the history of Tompkins Square Park. It's a wonderful park, but it's also had a lot of challenges over the years. I talked about this on the radio the other day. I'm very upset at the notion of anyone who, in effect, gives people the impression they're homeless to make money. That's what I think is going on. And I don't like it one bit. It's not illegal unless they do something illegal. This is something that Commissioner Bratton talked a lot about, and now Commissioner O'Neill's talked a lot about, that the NYPD has to be rightfully very discerning about whether a law has been broken. So, for example, if they're obstructing the right-of-way of people moving about the park, that's illegal. If they're menacing, that's illegal. If they're engaged in any overtly criminal activity, of course, there'll be enforcement. But I think what happens a lot of times is they hang out, they make money, they don't quite break any laws, but it's really a nuisance and it's really bad for the quality of life. And I don't understand it humanly. I don't understand why anyone would want to pursue that lifestyle, but it is a real issue.
We can do to help the community to get rid of this problem, which is, apparently that at night, they're pushed out of the park and they go down the street and they're causing a neighborhood problem.
They are causing neighborhood problems, and the challenge, Marcia, is while abiding by the Constitution, we will be as aggressive as we can be. That's the bottom line, right? We must observe people's constitutional rights, but that doesn't mean we can't be aggressive and creative. So again, if we see anything that's illegal, NYPD will be all over it. And we're certainly going to engage people. Look, I've said, a number of times with Homestat, which has now gotten over 700 people in off the streets and kept them in, it's a high engagement model. So we're going to go and talk to people. And some people, at first, it may not be clear if they're homeless or just, if you will, professionally panhandling. A lot of people won't even talk. And folks who really are homeless, folks often with mental health problems, a lot of times they don't want to divulge anything to the Homestat workers, and it takes coming back dozens of times or literally even hundreds of times to build a rapport. But with folks who are panhandling for a living or because somehow they think it's fun, we're still going to try and engage them, let them know it's not a positive activity. And if they want help with something better, we'll certainly help. Job training or whatever it might be, we'll help. But this one's thorny because as frustrating as it is, and it bothers me to say this, that panhandling per se is not illegal. Do you want to add, Councilmember? You good? Okay. Yeah, Ben.
Back to the trip for a moment. On the NYPD money, is it really your stance that you want to just defer to the NYPD on this? I mean, this is not, about them divulging sort of how they, secure the area for your project.
I want consistency with whatever their practice has been. That's what I'm saying.
More transparent.
I don't know what their practice has been, so I don't have a baseline.
I mean, they're not released, several outlets have asked, they're not.
I'm saying whatever it's been in the past, it should continue to be. That's what I'm comfortable with.
Your press secretary, has argued vehemently that doing tentative scheduling is just a no-no, and that there was no way to alert any members of the media that there was this trip that was possible, but it was going to depend on the funeral arrangements. Do you really think that the press corps and news organizations couldn't handle a little bit of sort of tentative notice so that they could possibly send a couple of...
No, I appreciate the question. Look, this was, first, as I said, there were two things going on. Up until well into, someone help me, Thursday, June 29th, I think it was, we did not know what was going to happen with mayoral control education. We were literally preparing to do tragically, a new Board of Education meeting at 9 a.m. on that Saturday morning, July 1st. So that's, my mind was all about mayoral control education and the other issues in the Albany session till the end of the 29th. And then on the 30th, we were doing a lot of mop-up on that. And then went into the holiday weekend and still had not resolved the issue because we hadn't had any time to focus on it. As we started to make sense of it, right in the middle of all that, this horrible tragedy occurred. So again, the immediate question was, when will the services be? Because that was going to frame everything. I think if you take, so I think we had two really abnormal situations happening that affected both focus and clarity. In a normal situation, of course, you could and we will, if we think something's likely but not definite, absolutely. There are times when we can give notice and say, hey, this is for your information. This one, and I stand by my press secretary 100% on this one was so gray that we thought it would just create confusion. And again, we were focused first and foremost on when would the services be. That was the decisive factor.
As being an anti-Trump voice, you said it's important for their, that's why you accepted the invitation. Is that a role you're embracing on an international stage, or is this a one-off?
No, I don't see it doing that. I think it's different, in fact. To be fair to everyone here, there were a lot of moving parts to what was going on in Hamburg, meaning the whole thing, separate from my involvement. This was a amazingly complex situation. 20 leading, nations of the world gathered. The anticipation, I don't think anyone's shocked by this statement, when Angela Merkel was planning this summit, she was expecting to welcome Hillary Clinton and was expecting it to be a very productive, high-impact summit. And I think the city of Hamburg, which is, Germany is the second most important country in the West right now. Hamburg's a very, very important city in that country. I think everyone anticipated a different reality. But the city wanted to focus on the things it was doing that they had thought would be consistent with the outcome of the summit and turned out to be in contrast to the summit. Hamburg's doing amazing things on renewable energy that we want to learn from. They're doing wonderful things on early child education. There's a whole host of things. They're a leading city for welcoming immigrants and refugees. So that's what we talked about, those kind of things, and how we can work together on that. And that's that kind of joint effort between mayors around this country and globally is going to be more of the norm going forward, because no one has the illusion our national government is going to address these issues. I mean, it's just as simple as that. Our whole view right now of what happens in Washington is stopping bad things from happening. There's no potential for a positive climate policy, a positive immigration policy, a positive policy to address income inequality, or any of that. So the cities of the world, and in some cases states, are going to have to lead the way, and we're all working with each other, and we're all trying to learn from each other, set goals together, et cetera. 300 plus cities in this country, and we all worked on this at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, have signed on to the Paris Accord. In and of ourselves, that's actually a really big deal. That's a lot of the country in terms of population. So that's going to be the norm. I don't anticipate travel going with that, but I do anticipate us working closely, certainly on a staff level, with the cities of the world to keep forwarding these goals. And the message was really, I mean, you'll notice I very purposely did not say the name Trump when I was there, because I do respect that, you know, when our president is overseas, there's a certain set of conditions. I don't think our president has exactly set records for protocol and proper discourse, but the rest of us can still recognize some ground rules that are fair. I wanted people to know, and they wanted to hear it, I know this, that the cities of this country and the majority of people in this country do want to act on climate change, do want to be respectful of immigrants, do want to treat the Muslim community with dignity, et cetera. That's what was important to communicate. Laura.
Mr. Mayor, I have 3 questions, so please bear with me.
You have 17 separate questions.
That's right.
Go ahead.
On your comments on panhandling, some of the advocates who work with homeless people and people who panhandle have really been bothered by your comments on this. They say that if someone is begging on the street, they're really being pushed to that, and that it's not easy for them to do that. And can you just respond to that specific criticism?
Yeah, I respect it, but I disagree with it. I'm not saying there isn't immense economic pain out there. This is what I've talked about for 4 years running. I'm saying panhandling is not the way to address it. We are trying with every tool we have to help people get jobs, get affordable housing, get training. And I think folks who are truly in need, more and more are receiving the message that there's a lot of help available to them, and I want them to take advantage of that help. And I think there are people who panhandle who are in desperate need and maybe don't know there's these other options or don't know what to do with it. There are people who have mental health and substance abuse problems, but there are also people who are doing it purely out of choice. I mean, this is a fact, who somehow think it's fun or they think it's a way to make easy money, and I resent that. I really do. So I think what the advocates are trying to say is, what if someone is desperately poor and feels they have no other choice? I respect that. But I think the advocates should be working with us to get those folks the help we can actually give them, which is ample.
The comments you made about Crown Heights and that project there, part of what you said was that your administration has to do a better job of communicating the benefits. You've said this before, you're going into year 4, you haven't been able to get as many rezonings done. Why hasn't the administration been able to communicate the benefits?
I think because there's tremendous fear in this city right now. And we've never seen anything like it. We've just never seen the fear of displacement at this level. We've never seen the cost of living at this level. I think, you know, we'll be talking in the coming days more and more about some of the positive signs, the amount of affordable housing that's being created, the amount of market housing that's being created, because that's actually going to start to adjust the situation and I think relieve some of the pressure. And I do want to say on the rezonings, and East New York was a great example. The more we talked to people, the more they got that if they wanted to see the creation of more affordable housing and the preservation of affordable housing, that the rezoning was the only way to get it done. that not having rezoning was in many ways much more dangerous. And I always use the example of places like Bed-Stuy, never had a rezoning, went through a huge amount of displacement. So I think this is one where we're going to have to show more that help is on the way, because it's going to be more and more tangible. The work we're doing with the city council on helping people avoid evictions is going to be felt more and more. There's a lot of pieces I think will start to calm some of the concern. But as we address rezonings going forward, I'll be out in communities as I was in East New York, talking it through with people and taking the tough questions. I think that's good. And I think in Crown Heights, again, I respect where the concerns are coming from. But I also know, and we saw this on mandatory inclusionary housing, you know, the don't change anything position is a very easy one to enunciate. Well, I want to see my team and I make the position, do you want a recreation center for your community? Do you want more affordable housing? Do you want all the good things that this can bring? And I think a lot of people will say yes. And I learned when I was a council member, what everyday people think versus the loudest voices can be two very different things. Melissa. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. We have a report that the alleged CCRB whistleblower who leaked the Panaleo discipline records has been subpoenaed by GOI.
I don't know about that.
Your views generally on whistleblowers, do you think that there should be a city investigation into him? And
Look, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know about what you're putting forward. I think there's ample protections in place for whistleblowers, as there should be. And on the other hand, there are rules for employees who deal with confidential information. And there are plenty of adjudicative mechanisms to figure out whether someone was a whistleblower or someone who mishandled confidential information or some combination thereof. I'm not here to judge that. But I do know this is a city, you know, that has real strong protections for whistleblowers. We have to be careful of the difference between a whistleblower and someone who has an axe to grind either personally or politically, which none of us would want to see when it comes to the access to confidential information. So that's a balance point. Okay, Gloria, let me get someone else. Melissa.
As you know, a couple of years ago, we did an investigation.
Louder, please.
As you know, a couple of years ago, we did an investigation that found that there was an organized group of women who were using their children to panhandle on the streets of the city. And at the time, you were outraged about it and you called for your children's cabinet to take up the issue. Yeah. We were ultimately told that your cabinet decided not to follow through with any actions because they were worried about criminalizing mothers. The police department told us that it technically was not illegal. But I'm wondering if today you're saying that you want to be aggressive, you don't buy that the panhandling behavior is really a necessity even for able-bodied adults. Why didn't your administration take more action when there were children being used for many hours a day on the streets?
Because, look, this is not over. I think the Children's Cabinet was trying to find a across-the-board policy we could implement, and I think what it comes down to, Melissa, is it's going to be case by case. And I wish we had a simpler approach, but the law is a really big part of this. I've had this conversation with Zach Carter more times than I can count. When is it the right of someone to freely assemble? And when is it endangering a child? That is literally only going to be determined case by case. I, as a parent, find it reprehensible that anyone would take their child out on the street and subject them to all that, or use their child to encourage donations. And again, Melissa, I'm arguing this because we are trying with every tool we got to help people. It's one thing if we were living in some draconian society that wouldn't offer any help. Again, I say this with deep respect to my advocate friends. I'm like, this city is at the highest point of compassion it's ever been. If you say, I want job training, you're going to get it. If you say, I have no place to live, we're going to help you and try and get you to permanent housing too, or whatever it may be. So I just don't understand why someone who has those options would put their child in that situation. I do understand there are people with mental illness challenges who can't comprehend the dynamic fully, and we want to try and address that too. And there's some people who are just craven. That's not a shock. It's sad. But we don't have an across-the-board policy because we can't find one. We just can't find. I've asked, is there anything that sort of differentiates consistently, and the only answer I've gotten from PD and from law department, that's a perfectly fair answer, is anything that's criminal. The second anything's criminal. Obviously, if a child was in visible physical distress, that would be endangerment of a child. Or if anybody was menacing someone for a contribution, you know, those, then we bring PD in immediately. But I'm glad you're raising it because it really matters as an issue, but we have not been able to find a solution yet. I'll take a few more. Yeah.
Two questions. The first, wanted to get your response. I know you put out a statement yesterday, but to the death of the 2 toddlers in the Bronx and the status of any investigation by ACS, by the city into their deaths.
Yeah, there's a full investigation going on. It's horrible. It's just horrible. You know, every time I see this, I feel, as a father, pain, and I feel particular pain when it's kids who are that young. And two children at once is rare. It's horrible. We just don't know enough yet. I can tell you, you know, I always have to be very careful about confidentiality, but I can say I have no indication so far of anything that a city agency could have done differently, but we need a full investigation to know that for sure.
Follow-up question. A woman who works for you, Jessica Ramos, in the press office, was live tweeting her very long commute this morning. It took her 2.5 hours to get in. She was stuck on a 7 train. She said people on her train were crying, some of them, because they were afraid that they were going to lose their job because they were stuck and having such a horrible commute. And I know this is an ongoing issue, but I mean, these are your constituents who are riding these trains, who are coming to work exceptionally late, coming home late. What can you do?
Grace,
I know you said you're not putting more money.
I'll answer it, but Grace, I really want to say, I mean, people can ask the question the 100th time. It's not going to change the answer. The state runs the MTA. The state has to step up. Now, I want to say, I think the selection of Joe Lhota, as I've said, I'll say it again, was a very good one. And that's a pretty ironic statement when someone says that about their former opponent for the office of mayor. But I think it was the right person for the job. He's been very responsive to us in a lot of communication with us. I think the immediate review they're doing is the right thing. And I think the solution, to me, the first rung solution is straightforward. Shift resources onto the basics. Like all of you, I was a little surprised to see an op-ed from Rahm Emanuel, but I want to be fair. The content was actually quite justified in the sense of he's right that what Chicago did was smart. And I think we need to now go back and investigate what we've done as an approach, and that starts, of course, with the state. So I think we have a chance here to say, okay, what we did before didn't work. Got to do something different. I think Joe Lhota might actually be ready to do that and shift resources within the MTA away from things that are less essential. What we need is the least sexy stuff, the signaling, the electronics, like all the most mundane stuff is what's going to affect the quality of life of New Yorkers. That's where all the resources and focus needs to go. And that's what we'll be pushing for. And I've said very clearly, if the MTA does not come up with its own plan, we'll come up with one and we'll be very public about it. But I'll be out there. I'll be around the city in the subways. I will be speaking up and advocating. I've had the conversation with Joe Lhota. I think it's the put up or shut up time. It's time for the MTA to give us that new plan. And if it's the right plan, it could actually start to relieve the pressure. Is late because of the subway? They're usually telling the truth nowadays. Now, there is a way to document it. We all know that. And I know most employers require that, and that's fair. But I do think it's so clear that there's a crisis that employers should be understanding. And, you know, we've got to see a plan to fix it. That's the bottom line. Anna.
Yesterday, a driver was sentenced, the first on Staten Island, to the right-of-way law for, causing the crash that killed a woman last year. And she was only sentenced to a $250 fine and no jail time. Do you think that that's appropriate, given that someone died?
I think those laws need to be strengthened. And that's the bottom line to me. Vision Zero is working, and there has been real improvement in the laws. And the council's been great about this, real improvement and strengthening of laws, but I think we have to keep going because that's how we'll save lives. Yeah.
Mayor, can you please provide an update on the senior home that's supposed to come to 30 Pike Street?
Louder.
The senior home that's supposed to come to 30 Pike Street to help replace some of the beds that were lost in Rivington House. Can you provide an update? When's an RFP going to be issued?
Is it me or did it suddenly get lighter in here? Okay. We are in the process of bringing in a combination of nursing home beds through the Health and Hospitals Corporation, available for low-income seniors, and senior affordable housing. And the number of beds that were at the Rivington facility was, I think, about 200. They were not all in use toward the end, obviously, but about 200. That's the number we've set that we want to be the replacement value between those senior affordable units and the nursing home slots, seats, or beds, I should say. And that's what's being put together. There's still details being worked through, but we're confident we will have a plan to achieve that. And that'll be, details will be put forward soon.
Mr. Mayor, there were reports yesterday of anywhere from a couple dozen to hundreds of NYPD officers turning their backs toward the church yesterday while you were speaking. I just wanted to get your reaction to it and also see, do you think that's attributed to your trip to Germany, or do you think something else is going on?
I'm not going to get into the underlying causes. I think that was stoked by certain institutions. But the fact is, it's very sad. We were all supposed to be there to respect a family in their hour of pain. That's the only thing people should have been thinking about, not making some kind of political statement. And it was a small number of people. Our understanding is it was in the dozens out of thousands of people in attendance. I just think it's sad. Yes.
Last time you were in Chinatown for that town hall meeting, there were complaints that you deployed so many police officers and checked people's bag and confiscated all the players with political messages. And I believe there was one formal complaint filed to the U.S. Attorney's Office on the freedom of speech basis. So
I'm not familiar with what you're saying. I'm sorry. You're saying.
You were in Chinatown to host that town hall meeting with Club Never Change.
Right.
There were some complaints that the police officers searched people's bags and
Oh, I'm not. Literally have no knowledge about that, so I don't have a comment because I'm not. It may have been reported. A lot of things are reported. I'm just not familiar with it, so I don't have. But my press office will follow up.
Going back to the funeral yesterday, the police commissioner asked himself, where are the demonstrations right now in favor of the NYPD? Do you think that people should be more vocal and demonstrate in favor of police the same way that we saw so many demonstrations in the last few years against the police?
I first of all have to say I really appreciated Commissioner O'Neill's remarks. They were very powerful, very much from the heart. I think it was important for New Yorkers to hear. I think he was speaking in a way that goes far beyond the question of, a traditional demonstration. I think he was saying something much more basic, which is people have to show appreciation to their police in many, many ways and communicate with the police. By the way, all those folks who came to the funeral, all those folks who came to the wake, all those folks who went to the station house, they were demonstrating too, if you will. They were demonstrating their appreciation and love for the police. So I took what he said to mean in all its forms. But I also was very struck by the comments of Inspector Rivera, who is the precinct commander, who said sometimes it's as simple as a New Yorker saying hello to a police officer. But then he said, we all have to do better, including the police. And I thought that was very meaningful, that here's the guy who was the head of the precinct that suffered this loss, but he still said, we all have to reach each other. And the family, of course, was the most powerful of all, talking about respect for police, but also just love in our society. I mean, it was incredibly heartfelt. So I don't think it's about let's stage a rally. I think it's about what we do every single day. I also always want to say, I know a lot of folks who protested over time, and very few of them, in my experience, were anti-police, quote unquote. They wanted change in policies, but had a lot of respect for the police nonetheless. The silent march in 2011 that had such a big impact on stop and frisk, there was thousands and thousands of people. They weren't anti-police. They wanted to see different policies. They wanted to see the broken use of stop and frisk ended. There are a small number of people who are anti-police, and I couldn't disagree with them more. I find that reprehensible. But I want us sort of to think about our own discourse and how, in the spirit of the funeral yesterday, how we improve that discourse and use words that really reflect the reality. Most people, overwhelming majority, want our police to succeed and want to have a closer relationship with them. And I think the police are doing a much better job than even a few years ago at fostering those relationships. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it's a powerful moment of reflection for the city and something will come from it. Okay, thanks everyone.